What if the word China is more than a simple place name? What if it is a living symbol, a cipher carrying a legacy of ambition, pride, and a worldview that has shaped not just a country, but an entire civilization for over 3,000 years? And what if the real term, Zhongguo, holds the secret to understanding not only the past, but the future of global politics and economics? Today, we're going to decode the hidden power of one of the world's most misunderstood names, a story that stretches from ancient bronze vessels to the towering skyscrapers of modern Beijing. When you hear China, perhaps the phrase Middle Kingdom comes to mind, a term you've seen in textbooks, heard in news reports, or noticed in speeches by diplomats. But that translation barely hints at the profound and complex story behind the name. Zhongguo is more than a label. It is a thread weaving together identity, unity, pride, and the ongoing tension between tradition and transformation. Let's travel back in time to the origins of this name. The first known use of Zhongguo is inscribed on the He bronze vessel, an artifact crafted between 1038 and 1000 years before the Common Era. Imagine the world then. Clustered kingdoms along the Yellow River, a cradle of rice paddies, walled towns, and ritual ceremonies. Zhongguo referred to the central states, the heartland of what would become the roots of Chinese civilization. It was not an empire, not yet a nation-state. It was a region, a gathering of people who saw themselves as distinct from the tribes and societies on their borders. As centuries passed, dynasties rose and fell like the tides of the mighty Yangtze. Each regime left its mark, and for eras as long as 3 centuries, the people called their homeland by the ruling dynasty's name, Song, Tang, Ming, or Han. Yet beneath these shifting banners, a powerful idea endured, a sense of belonging to a unique civilization. The Han Dynasty, which spanned from 202 years before the Common Era to 220 years after, left a legacy so enduring that today, the term Han Chinese describes the world's largest ethnic group. Their script, Hanzi, and their language, Hanyu, are still the pillars of Chinese culture. But Zhongguo was never the only name. Over millennia, other terms emerged to express the evolving self-perception of the Chinese people. Huaxia, meaning the civilized world, was perhaps the earliest term, rooted in the mythic past and used to distinguish the refined, literate societies of the Central Plains from the so-called barbarians beyond. It was less a geographic claim than a statement of cultural superiority. Tianxia, or all under heaven, went even further, describing an order in which the world itself was divided between a civilizational center and a periphery, with China as the axis. This cosmic worldview influenced everything, from court rituals to foreign policy, and shaped the tributary system, a network of diplomatic relationships stretching across East Asia. In this system, neighboring states such as Korea, Vietnam, and the Ryukyu Islands recognized the symbolic supremacy of the Chinese emperor. They sent tribute missions, received gifts in return, and traded under a framework that reinforced China's centrality. For nearly 2,000 years, this system ordered politics, commerce, and even culture across the region. From the perspective of the Chinese court, the emperor was the son of heaven, ruling not just a country, but the very center of civilization. As political scientist Lucian Pai famously observed, China is a civilization pretending to be a state. Yet, this worldview was both a strength and a vulnerability. Historian Wang Gengwu notes that the concept of Zhongguo fostered unity and resilience, yet sometimes made adaptation to global norms difficult. The sense of being at the center of the world helped unify disparate peoples, but also slowed the acceptance of new ideas from abroad. The tributary system, for example, worked well as long as China was the region's dominant power. But when Western gunboats appeared in East Asian waters in the 19th century, the old order crumbled. The 19th century was a century of humiliation for China. Western powers, wielding advanced technology and new ideas about nation-states, forced a proud civilization into a series of unequal treaties. The Opium Wars, beginning in the 1840s, shattered the myth of invulnerability. For many Chinese scholars and reformers, the crisis was not just military or economic. It was existential. Who were they, if not the Middle Kingdom? How could they unite a country riven by rebellion, corruption, and foreign occupation? It was during this era of crisis that Zhongguo began to transform. Reformers such as Liang Qichao, a visionary journalist and political thinker, urged the adoption of Zhongguo as a national name. He hoped it would rally a fractured land, comprised of dozens of provinces and 56 officially recognized ethnic groups around a shared identity. This was a radical move. For centuries, people had thought of themselves as subjects of a dynasty, not citizens of a nation. But as the Qing dynasty collapsed in the early 20th century, and as revolution and civil war racked the land, Zhongguo became the rallying cry for unity. The 20th century saw the formal institutionalization of this name. Both the Republic of China, founded in 1911, and the People's Republic of China, established in 1949, used Zhonghua in their official titles. This was no accident. Zhonghua combined the ancient terms Zhongguo and Huaxia, invoking both geographical centrality and cultural heritage. Yet beneath the surface, questions remained unresolved. Who counts as Chinese? Is it a matter of ethnicity, culture, or political allegiance? In the words of sinologist Jeremy Barmé, the state uses the Zhonghua Minzu concept to promote unity, often downplaying internal diversity. These questions are not just academic. Take, for example, the island of Taiwan. There, many people resist the label Zhongguoren, meaning Chinese person, as a way to assert a separate identity and push back against Beijing's claims. This dispute is more than semantics. It is a flashpoint for regional security. Political scientist Sui Shengzhao argues that competing interpretations of Chinese identity are at the heart of the ongoing debate over Taiwan's status and cross-strait relations. But the debate over who belongs to Zhongguo is not limited to Taiwan. Inside the People's Republic of China, the government promotes the idea of Zhonghua Minzu, a unified Chinese nation encompassing 56 ethnic groups, from the majority Han to Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongols, and many others. Critics say this narrative sometimes glosses over real differences, imposing a single identity on a tapestry of cultures. Yet it is also a powerful tool for forging national unity in the face of domestic and international challenges. This evolving sense of identity is not just a matter of internal politics. It is also a lens through which the world sees China, and through which China sees the world. As China's global influence surges, through initiatives like the Belt and Road, its actions are often interpreted through the prism of the Middle Kingdom mentality. Journalist Bill Hayton notes that China's sweeping maritime claims in the South China Sea are driven not just by economic interests, but by a centuries-old sense of centrality and rightful place in the region. When Chinese diplomats assert the country's interests at the United Nations or in international trade talks, they are often guided by a worldview shaped by millennia of cultural tradition. Let's consider the legacy of the tributary system in today's diplomacy. For centuries, the Chinese court expected foreign envoys to perform the kowtow, a ritual act of deference to the emperor. Today, while the rituals have changed, some experts see echoes of this worldview in China's expectations of respect and recognition from other nations. When Beijing pursues ambitious projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, linking more than 60 countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe, is not just building infrastructure. It is also exporting a vision of global order, in which China is once again a central node. Yet the world has changed. The international system is now defined by sovereign nation-states, not by empires or cosmic hierarchies. This creates tension. On one hand, China seeks respect as a modern country, a peer among equals. On the other, its leaders sometimes invoke ancient concepts like Tianxia, suggesting a broader, almost civilizational mission. Historian Peter Turchin points out that China's history is marked by cycles of unity and disunity, driven in part by geography and the enduring concept of Zhongguo. The current era may be another turning point, as China balances its ancient self-image with the demands of global integration. Now, let's look at some lesser-known facts that reveal how these ideas have shaped the world. The term "serica," used by Roman geographers, likely comes from the Chinese word for silk, highlighting China's early influence on global trade through the Silk Road. The Treaty of Nerchinsk, signed in 1689 between the Qing dynasty and Tsarist Russia, was the first international treaty to use Zhongguo in a diplomatic context, an early sign of China's emergence as a modern state. Throughout history, names have been tools of power. The choice to call the country Zhongguo or Huaxia to emphasize unity or diversity has always carried political consequences. In the early 20th century, reformers debated whether to create a modern nation based on ethnicity, territory, or shared history. The solution: The inclusive but sometimes ambiguous term Zhongguo helped hold the country together during decades of war and revolution. But today, it also stirs debate about minority rights and the meaning of citizenship. The debate over identity is not just a Chinese story. Consider other civilizations that have struggled with similar questions. The Roman Empire called itself Roma, but its citizens included Greeks, Syrians, Gauls, and North Africans. The Ottoman Empire used the term Osmanli, but encompassed Turks, Arabs, Armenians, and Slavs. As empires fractured and new nations emerged, questions of identity, who belongs, who is excluded, what names mean, shaped the destinies of millions. In China's case, the stakes are enormous. The People's Republic is now a superpower, with the world's largest population, second largest economy, and a military that commands the attention of every global capital. The way China understands itself, as a single, unified civilization, or as a mosaic of cultures, will determine its approach to everything from diplomacy to technology, from trade to climate change. For global businesses, understanding these nuances is critical. Companies seeking to enter the Chinese market must learn to navigate not just regulations, but stories and symbols that resonate with the government and the public. Diplomats, too, must recognize that their Chinese counterparts may see negotiations as more than transactions between states. They may see them as encounters between civilizations, with all the weight of history, prestige, and cultural expectation. This can lead to misunderstandings, but also to opportunities for deeper engagement, if both sides are willing to learn from one another's worldviews. For ordinary people around the globe, understanding the story of Zhongguo is a key to decoding the headlines. When China asserts its interests in the South China Sea, is it acting as a country defending its territory, or as a civilization enacting its vision of Tianxia, all under heaven? When Chinese leaders speak of building a community of shared future for mankind, is this a genuine offer of cooperation, or a new form of civilizational leadership? The answers depend on how we interpret the deep, often hidden meanings behind names and symbols. Let's imagine two futures. In one, Beijing clings tightly to a vision of singular unity and centrality, insisting that all who live within its borders, and even some beyond, must conform to a single definition of Chinese. This could escalate tensions in places like the Taiwan Strait, fuel nationalism, and prompt other nations to band together in resistance, creating a new era of rivalry reminiscent of the old tributary system, but now armed with modern technology and global stakes. The risk of military confrontation would rise, and the world could see a return to bloc politics, with China and its allies on one side and a coalition of other powers on the other. In the second scenario, China chooses a more inclusive path. It acknowledges its internal diversity, respects the distinct identities of places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and its many ethnic minorities, and projects its growing power through dialogue rather than dominance. This approach could transform the Belt and Road Initiative into a true engine of shared prosperity, enhancing China's soft power and making it a leader not just in technology and infrastructure, but in global cooperation. The world would see China as a partner, not just a competitor, and the legacy of Zhongguo would become a bridge rather than a barrier. Expert opinions diverge on which path is more likely. Historian Wang Gengwu, for example, warns that the idea of Zhongguo is a double-edged sword. It can foster unity, but if wielded as a tool of exclusion, it risks isolating China from the very world it seeks to influence. Journalist Bill Hayton cautions that China's historical sense of centrality can lead to friction with neighbors, especially in contested regions like the South China Sea. Political scientist Suisheng Zhao points out that as long as competing interpretations of Chinese identity persist, the debate over Taiwan's status will remain a flashpoint with global consequences. Let's bring this down to practical lessons. For international investors, understanding China's self-perception is not just academic trivia. It's the difference between success and failure. For instance, Western companies have stumbled by launching advertisements that inadvertently insult cultural symbols, triggering public backlash and government penalties. On the other hand, brands that show respect for Chinese heritage or align their products with positive stories about unity and harmony often find a warmer welcome. For governments crafting foreign policy, recognizing the layers of meaning behind Zhongguo can help predict China's actions and avoid costly missteps. When China resists adopting certain international norms, it may be less about specific policies and more about a deep-seated desire to maintain a unique civilizational identity. As Bill Hayton observed, China's maritime claims are not simply about resources, but about fulfilling an ancient sense of rightful place in the world order. This perspective also shapes China's approach to technology and innovation. The government promotes the idea of indigenous innovation, a term that blends pride in ancient achievements with a drive for 21st century leadership. Initiatives, such as Made in China 2025 and the Digital Silk Road, are not just economic strategies. They are expressions of a vision in which China, as Zhongguo, reclaims its central role in global affairs. But the risks are real. If China's leaders allow nostalgia for the past to harden into exclusionary policies, they may find themselves isolated, facing pushback not just from rivals but from partners and neighbors. The lesson of history is clear. Civilizations that flourish are those that adapt, that balance pride in their heritage with openness to new ideas. And here's a secret fact that few outside academic circles know. The very first written use of Zhongguo on the Hezun bronze vessel, more than 3,000 years ago, did not describe a monolith. It described a gathering, a coming together of diverse peoples and ideas in a shared space. That spirit of evolution, adaptation, and inclusion is still alive today, even as China stands at the crossroads of history. So the next time you hear the name China, remember it is not just a word, but a living story. One that continues to shape the destinies of over 1,400,000,000 people and the entire planet. Will the legacy of Zhongguo be a force for unity or division in the 21st century? That choice, as history shows, will depend not just on the decisions of China's leaders, but on how the world engages with this ancient, ever-changing idea. If you found this deep dive into the hidden power of Zhongguo illuminating, don't forget to subscribe for more explorations of the forces shaping our world. What do you think? Can China's ancient identity become a bridge to global cooperation? Or will it spark new rivalries? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join the conversation.